The screaming began before dawn. It tore through the Alpha packhouse with such raw violence that servants woke instantly from their sleep, clutching blankets against their chests while panic spread through the stone halls like wildfire. Another outburst. Another nightmare. Heavy footsteps thundered upstairs. Guards shouted orders over one another while furniture shattered violently against walls. Somewhere deeper inside the Alpha residence, someone cried out in pain. Nobody needed to ask who caused it. Everyone already knew. The Alpha heir was awake. Snowstorms battered the mountains outside, rattling frost against towering windows while fear consumed the packhouse from within. Torches flickered wildly in the corridors as servants pressed themselves against the walls, trying to stay out of the way. Because when the young heir lost control, people bled. A guard stumbled backward around the corner, clutching his forearm. Blood poured between his fingers while another man rushed to support him. He bit through the leather. "Where's the Alpha?" "Don't let him reach the stairs!" The shouting only made things worse. A low, animalistic growl echoed down the hallway. Then silence fell suddenly. Not calm silence, the kind that came moments before something terrible happened. A young servant carrying fresh water froze in the middle of the corridor, trembling violently. The child stood at the opposite end, barefoot, wild-eyed, small enough to still look harmless at first glance. But nobody inside the packhouse made that mistake anymore. The boy's dark hair hung messily over silver eyes filled with something far too feral for a child his age. Blood stained one sleeve of his nightclothes while his tiny chest rose sharply with uneven breaths. His gaze locked onto movement instantly. The servant panicked. The water bucket crashed against the floor, and the child attacked. The hallway exploded into chaos. The servant screamed while guards lunged forward too late. The boy moved with terrifying speed, slamming into the servant hard enough to knock him against the wall before sharp little teeth buried into his shoulder. Blood splattered across stone. The servant cried out in agony. 3 guards grabbed the child at once. It barely helped. The boy thrashed violently like a trapped wolf cub fighting for survival, snarling and clawing while fear twisted his expression into something heartbreaking and monstrous all at once. "Hold him! Don't let him bite again. He's stronger tonight." A guard suddenly shouted in pain as claws ripped across his face. The child broke free instantly. Then he crouched low against the floor, breathing heavily while every person around him backed away in fear. Nobody understood him anymore, not even his own father. At the far end of the hallway, Alpha Kale finally appeared. The towering Alpha moved through the corridor with controlled authority despite the exhaustion buried beneath his expression. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Sleepless nights had slowly carved permanent grief into his features over the years, but the worst pain came from watching his own son feared like an animal. The guard stepped aside immediately. The child looked up. For one brief moment, silence passed between father and son. Kale's chest tightened painfully, because there had been a time when his boy laughed, a time before the nightmares, before the screaming, before blood became normal inside the packhouse. Now the child only stared at him with distrust, like even his father could not be trusted. The realization hollowed Kale further every single day. Slowly, carefully, the Alpha stepped forward. "It's all right," the child instantly growled. Every guard tensed again. Kale stopped moving. Pain flickered briefly across his face before disappearing beneath years of practiced control. Nothing worked anymore. Not discipline, not healers, not patience, not love. His son remained trapped inside constant terror no one could reach. The pack whispered cruel things now, that the heir was cursed, broken mad. Some even claimed the bloodline itself had rotted after the Luna's death years ago. Kale ignored those whispers publicly. Privately, he feared them, because no matter how many times healers examined the child, nobody could explain the violent episodes. The boy attacked without warning, bit anyone who touched him unexpectedly. Sometimes screamed for hours through the night like invisible monsters hunted him through his dreams. And worst of all, he never allowed anyone near him willingly. Not servants, not guards, not even Kale himself. Another servant approached cautiously, carrying sedative herbs prepared by the healers. The child noticed instantly. Pure panic exploded across his face. "No!" The sound came broken and raw before the boy launched himself across the corridor again. The servant dropped the herbs with a terrified scream. Guards rushed forward. Furniture shattered. Someone slammed against the wall hard enough to crack wood. The child screamed louder than before, trapped inside overwhelming fear no one understood. Then suddenly, everything stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. The screaming cut off mid-sound. The growling vanished. Even the struggling ceased. Confused silence filled the corridor. The guards froze. Kale turned sharply. Someone else had entered the hallway. An Omega. Quiet. Thin. Scarred. He stood near the corridor entrance holding folded linens against his chest while confusion spread slowly across his face. Clearly, he had walked into the wrong section of the packhouse by mistake. The moment he realized where he was, he lowered his gaze immediately. Fear flashed through him. Every servant in the residence knew better than to wander near the alpha heir during an outburst. The Omega swallowed nervously and stepped backward. Too late. The child was already staring at him. Kale's stomach tightened. The guards prepared themselves. Everyone expected another attack. The Omega did too. His grip tightened around the linens, while scars running along part of his neck caught the flickering torchlight. Old scars. Ugly scars. The kind caused by violence long ago. The child stared at them silently. Then something changed. The rage inside his silver eyes faded piece by piece. His breathing slowed. The trembling stopped. The entire corridor watched in disbelief as the boy slowly stood upright. Calm. For the first time all morning. Calm. Nobody moved. The Omega looked trapped between terror and confusion. The child began walking toward him, one slow step at a time. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. "Stop him," one whispered. Kyle raised a hand immediately. Something about this moment felt wrong, or perhaps too important to interrupt. The Omega remained frozen in place while the child approached directly in front of him. Silence swallowed the hallway whole. The boy stared upward quietly. The Omega barely breathed. Then instead of attacking, the child reached forward carefully and grabbed the edge of his sleeve. A collective breath caught across the corridor. The linens slipped from the Omega's hands onto the floor. The child leaned slightly closer against him. Not violent, not aggressive, almost relieved. Kale felt genuine shock for the first time in years, because his son had never approached anyone like this before, ever. The Omega looked horrified by the attention. I'm sorry, Alpha," he whispered quickly without lifting his eyes. "I entered the wrong corridor." The child suddenly tightened his grip when the Omega tried stepping away. A low warning growl escaped him immediately. The message was clear. Do not leave. The hallway fell silent again. One guard stared openly. Another muttered something under his breath about witchcraft. Kale ignored them all. His focus remained entirely on his son. The boy's expression had transformed completely. No fear, no violence, only intense watchfulness directed toward the Omega standing before him. Kale stepped forward cautiously. The child reacted instantly, not toward his father, toward the guards. The boy bared his teeth sharply when two guards moved closer to the Omega as if protecting him from them. Protecting. The realization unsettled everyone present. Kale studied the Omega carefully now. The man kept his eyes lowered, clearly trying not to provoke attention. His clothing was plain servant fabric worn thin with age. One sleeve hid fading bruises near his wrist. A forgotten Omega. Nothing special. Nothing powerful. Yet somehow his presence alone had calmed the most feared child in the territory. "What is your name?" Kale finally asked. The Omega hesitated. "Aaron." The child's grip on Aaron's sleeve loosened slightly at the sound of his voice. Kale noticed immediately. Every detail mattered now, because for the first time in years, something had reached his son. The entire packhouse changed after that morning. Whispers spread through the territory before sunset arrived. The feral heir allowed an Omega near him. Not only near him, he followed him. Servants watched nervously while Aaron carried supplies through lower servant halls with the child walking silently behind him like a shadow. At first, Aaron tried encouraging him back toward the Alpha quarters. It failed immediately. The moment distance formed between them, the child's breathing became erratic again. Panic flashed across his face so violently that nearby servants backed away in alarm. Then Aaron stepped closer again. Instant calm. It made no sense, and people feared what they could not understand. By evening, some servants refused entering rooms if the child and Omega occupied the same space together. Others crossed themselves quietly when Aaron walked by. The scarred Omega, who nobody noticed, yesterday had suddenly become the center of the entire packhouse. Aaron hated it. He spent most of his life learning how to survive unnoticed. Attention inside wolf packs often became dangerous for Omegas, especially damaged ones. And Aaron was deeply damaged. The scars along his face guaranteed people remembered that. Some claimed rogues attacked him years ago. Others whispered worse things. Aaron never corrected anyone. Silence protected him better than truth ever could. But silence became impossible now, especially when the Alpha heir refused letting him out of sight. That evening, Aaron entered. His tiny servant quarters carrying fresh blankets only to stop abruptly. The child sat outside his door waiting. 2 exhausted guards stood nearby, looking miserable. "He refused to leave," one muttered. The boy looked up immediately upon seeing Aaron. No aggression, no screaming, only quiet focus, like he had been waiting the entire time. Aaron's chest tightened strangely. Nobody waited for him. Nobody looked relieved when he returned. Yet, this terrifying child visibly relaxed the moment he appeared. The guard stepped closer carefully. "We need to return him upstairs." The boy growled instantly. One guard cursed under his breath. "See?" Aaron hesitated before crouching carefully several feet away from the child. Up close, the boy looked smaller somehow. Tired. Dark shadows lived beneath silver eyes too young to carry so much fear. "What do you want?" Aaron asked quietly. The child stared at him silently, then slowly reached toward the door behind Aaron. The meaning became painfully obvious. He wanted to stay. The guards looked horrified. "That's impossible." The child immediately snarled again. Aaron flinched slightly, but beneath the aggression he noticed something unexpected. Fear. Not anger. The child feared being separated. Like every instinct inside him screamed danger whenever Aaron disappeared. The realization sent unease curling through Aaron's stomach. Why him, out of everyone inside the territory? Why him? A cold draft swept through the corridor while silence stretched between them. Finally, Aaron looked toward the guards. Maybe if he rests a while, he'll calm down enough to return upstairs later. Neither guard liked the idea, but neither wanted another violent episode either. Reluctantly, they agreed. The moment Aaron opened his room door, the child stepped inside immediately. No hesitation, no fear, as though he already trusted the space because Aaron existed within it. The guards exchanged disturbed looks before leaving reluctantly. Then Aaron and the child were alone. The room felt painfully small suddenly. A narrow bed. One candle. Folded. Blankets. Nothing more. Aaron placed the fresh linens aside quietly while the child remained near the door watching him constantly. waiting, expecting something. Aaron moved carefully to avoid startling him. "You can stay until morning," he whispered eventually. The child blinked slowly. Then, without warning, exhaustion crashed over him completely. The boy curled near the bedside floor and fell asleep within minutes. Just like that. No violence. No nightmares. Only silence. Aaron stared at him for a very long time. Even sleeping, the child looked tense. One small hand remained curled tightly near his chest while faint bruises marked his arms beneath loose sleeves. Aaron frowned slightly. Those bruises looked old. Too old. A strange ache settled heavily inside him. He understood fear. Understood what constant survival did to a person. The entire packhouse called this child feral. But lying there on the floor beneath candlelight, he looked more frightened than dangerous. A knock suddenly echoed outside the door. Aaron stiffened instantly. Then Alpha Kale entered quietly. The Alpha's gaze moved directly toward the sleeping child, and for several long moments, neither man spoke. Kale looked exhausted beyond words. But beneath the exhaustion lived something worse. Hope. Fragile and dangerous. "He hasn't slept peacefully in months," Kale admitted softly. Aaron lowered his eyes immediately. "I didn't do anything." "That may be the problem," Kale murmured. Aaron looked confused. Kale stared at his son silently. "Everyone else keeps trying to control him." The room fell quiet again. Finally, Kale looked toward Aaron fully. "You will remain near him for now." It was not a request. Aaron's stomach tightened painfully. Trouble always followed powerful families, and now somehow he stood directly in the center of theirs. Kale turned toward the doorway before stopping briefly. "He trusts you." Tite. Alpha's voice carried something dangerously close to grief. "I need to understand why." Morning light barely touched the frozen mountains before the whispers began again. Servants moved carefully through the Alpha packhouse, carrying trays, blankets, and water buckets while pretending not to stare toward the lower servant wing. Because the future Alpha heir had spent the entire night inside an Omega's room. Nobody inside the territory could remember the last time the child slept peacefully. No screaming, no shattered furniture, no guards dragged bleeding through corridors before sunrise. Only silence. And somehow that silence frightened the pack more than the violence ever had. Aaron felt their eyes following him the moment he stepped into the hallway. The child walked directly behind him, barefoot again, silent again, watching everyone. The tension in the corridor thickened instantly. A servant carrying tea lowered his gaze and hurried away. Two maids stopped whispering the second Aaron passed. Somewhere farther down the hall, a guard muttered something under his breath about cursed bonds and unnatural attachment. Aaron pretended not to hear. Years inside the pack taught him survival through silence. But surviving quietly became impossible. Now, the child would not leave him alone. Every step Aaron took echoed with smaller footsteps following close behind. Not aggressive, not demanding. Just constant. Like the boy feared Aaron might disappear if he looked away for too long. The realization unsettled him deeply. When Aaron entered the kitchen storage room, the child waited outside the doorway. When Aaron cleaned unused servant halls, the boy sat nearby watching. When Aaron paused to fold linens, silver eyes tracked every movement carefully, like memorizing proof he still existed. It was not normal attachment. It was desperation, and everyone inside the packhouse noticed it. By midday, rumors spread beyond the residence itself. The feral heir had become obsessed with a scarred Omega. Some claimed witchcraft. Others believed Aaron manipulated the child for power. A few whispered darker things, that perhaps the heir recognized weakness. Because madness lived inside both of them, Aaron ignored it outwardly. Inside, fear slowly tightened around his ribs, because powerful wolves destroyed anything they could not control. And right now, nobody controlled the alpha heir except him. The first real problem came during lunch. For years, feeding the child required multiple guards standing nearby while servants prepared for violence at any moment. Sometimes the heir refused food entirely. Other times, he attacked anyone approaching too quickly. Today looked no different at first. The dining chamber remained tense while servants placed dishes carefully across the long wooden table. Alpha Kyle stood near the windows, watching silently while healers lingered nearby with sedatives hidden beneath cloth. The child sat rigidly in his chair, glaring at everyone around him. Untouched food rested before him. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then, Aaron entered carrying fresh water. The transformation was immediate. The child's shoulders relaxed. Not fully, but enough to make the entire room notice. Silver eyes followed Aaron instantly, while low, anxious growling faded from the boy's throat. 1. Healer stepped forward carefully. Interesting. The child snarled immediately. The healer backed away fast. Aaron froze near the doorway, unsure what to do. Kale's voice cut through the silence. Sit. Aaron blinked. The alpha gestured toward the empty chair beside the child. Several servants looked horrified. Omega servants never sat beside alpha bloodlines, especially not during meals. But Kale's expression allowed no argument. Slowly, Aaron obeyed. The moment he sat beside him, the child finally touched the food. Soft gasps spread quietly around the room. The boy ate carefully without taking his eyes off Aaron for long. Like he needed constant reassurance, the Omega remained there. Kale noticed everything, every movement, every shift in breathing. Hope and fear warred visibly across the alpha's face. Because this should have felt like progress. Instead, it felt like uncovering something buried alive. One elderly healer finally spoke quietly. Children form attachments. After trauma sometimes, the child suddenly stiffened, his grip tightened painfully around the silverware. Aaron saw panic rising instantly. Too many eyes, too many voices, too much pressure. The boy shoved backward from the table hard enough to topple the chair behind him. Servants jumped. Guards moved instantly, and the child panicked. No! The scream echoed violently across the chamber while sharp claws tore across the table surface. Aaron reacted before thinking. He reached toward the boy carefully. It's all right. The child froze. His breathing remained uneven. But slowly, painfully, slowly, he calmed beneath Aaron's voice. Silence consumed the dining hall. The guards stared openly now. Even Kale looked shaken. Because nobody else could stop an episode once it began. Nobody. Yet Aaron somehow reached the child every single time, and the more it happened, the more dangerous both of them became. That evening, Aaron overheard the servants talking. They should remove him. The Omega? He's making the heir weaker. No, worse, dependent. Aaron stood motionless behind the laundry room doorway while their whispers slithered through the corridor. He follows that Omega like a lost pup. I heard the council wants him gone before the bond deepens. The Alpha would never allow it. You sure about that? Silence followed. Then one servant lowered her voice further. Powerful families protect bloodlines first. Always. The words settled cold and heavy inside Aaron's chest. Because she was right. If the council decided Aaron threatened the heir somehow, his life meant nothing compared to preserving Alpha reputation. Footsteps suddenly echoed behind him. The child appeared silently in the hallway carrying one of Aaron's folded blankets clutched tightly against his chest. He looked calmer tonight, less haunted, but exhaustion still lived inside his eyes. Aaron forced a small breath. You shouldn't wander alone. The child stared at him quietly, then slowly offered the blanket toward him. Aaron hesitated before taking it carefully. The simple gesture struck him harder than expected. Nobody had given him kindness in a very long time. The child sat near the laundry room wall afterward while Aaron continued folding linens. Silence stretched peacefully between them. For the first time in years, Aaron did not feel completely alone. That realization frightened him more than the whispers, because attachment became dangerous for people like him. Hope even more so. 3 nights later, the packhouse descended into chaos again. Aaron had stayed late organizing storage rooms in another wing after a servant requested help. He assumed the child slept upstairs already. He was wrong. The screaming began moments after sunset. A servant sprinted through the corridor pale with panic. "He can't find you!" Aaron's stomach dropped instantly. More crashing echoed upstairs. Guards shouted orders while another howl of terror ripped through the residence hard enough to freeze blood. Not rage. Fear. Pure, overwhelming fear. Aaron ran. By the time he reached the main staircase, the scene looked catastrophic. Broken furniture littered the halls. Torn curtains hung from walls while 3 guards struggled unsuccessfully to restrain the child near the upper corridor. The boy fought like something cornered. To death. Bleeding hands clawed wildly across wooden floors while panic consumed every movement. "He won't stop!" Someone shouted. The child screamed again, then suddenly saw Aaron. Everything changed instantly. The boy ripped free from the guards and ran directly toward him. Servants gasped in alarm, expecting another attack. Instead, the child slammed against Aaron, desperately clutching his clothing with shaking hands. His entire body trembled violently. Aaron froze. The child buried his face against him, breathing hard like he had been drowning moments earlier, and without realizing it, Aaron wrapped his arms around him. The hallway fell silent. Even the guards stopped moving, because nobody inside the packhouse had ever seen the heir seek comfort before. Not once. The child's breathing slowly steadied against Aaron's chest. Tiny. Fingers remained locked tightly into his sleeves like he feared separation more than anything else alive. Aaron looked downward, quietly, and suddenly the truth hit him hard enough to ache. This child was not trying to control him. He was terrified of being abandoned again. Later that night, Alpha Kale summoned Aaron privately. The Alpha's office overlooked frozen cliffs beyond the territory walls. Fire crackled softly near towering bookshelves, while tension hung thick between them. The child sat silently near the fireplace, watching, always watching. Kale stood beside the window with exhaustion carved deeply into his face. "You calm him faster every day." Aaron lowered his eyes. "I don't know how. That's what concerns me." The honesty surprised him. Kale turned slowly. "This attachment is becoming dangerous." The child immediately stiffened. Aaron noticed at once. Kale noticed too. The Alpha closed his eyes briefly before continuing. "The council believes you influence him somehow. I would never hurt him. I know, but others did not. And politics inside wolf packs rarely cared about truth." Kale moved toward his desk heavily. "For years they questioned whether my son would survive childhood." Pain tightened his voice quietly. "They call him unstable. Feral. Broken." The child lowered his head slightly, hearing the words. Aaron's chest twisted painfully. Kale noticed that too. Now suddenly, he trusts someone. The Alpha exhaled slowly. "Do you understand how frightening that becomes for people who built their power around controlling fear?" Aaron said nothing, because he understood perfectly. Weak people feared powerful things they could not predict. And right now, nobody understood the heir anymore, not even his own family. The fire crackled softly between them. Then Kale asked the question haunting everyone. Why you? Silence filled the room. Aaron wanted an answer himself, but before either man spoke again, something strange happened. One servant entered quietly carrying documents for Kale. The moment the child saw him, he panicked. Pure terror flooded his expression instantly. The boy lunged backward away from the servant while low, vicious growls vibrated through the room. The servant froze pale. Kyle frowned sharply. What is this? The child clung near Aaron immediately without taking his eyes off the servant. Fear. Not anger. Fear. Aaron noticed the servant trembling now too. Too nervous. Too guilty. A cold unease slid down his spine. Then he saw it. The servant's silver ring carried the old crest of the former Luna's household. The dead Luna, the child's mother. The boy growled louder. Kale dismissed the servant immediately, confusion darkening his expression, but Aaron could not stop thinking about the fear in the child's eyes. Not random fear, recognition, and suddenly memories surfaced from earlier days. The abandoned hallway, the locked wing, the scratch marks on old, wooden doors. The child reacting violently around specific people only, like he remembered something terrible connected to them. Aaron looked slowly toward the child curled protectively near his side, then toward the office doorway where the servant disappeared moments earlier. A terrible realization began forming inside him. What if the boy was never violent without reason? What if everyone misunderstood the fear entirely? And what if the real danger inside the packhouse had never been the child at all? Snow continued falling heavily beyond the territory walls while sleepless tension spread through the Alpha residence. That night, Aaron could not rest. The child slept near the fireplace wrapped in blankets while moonlight spilled across the floor in pale silver patterns. Peaceful, for once, truly peaceful. Aaron sat quietly beside the window watching snowstorms swallow the mountains outside. His thoughts refused to settle. The air feared certain people, certain places, certain memories, not madness, trauma. The possibility terrified him, because if the child remembered something buried years ago, then someone inside the packhouse might be desperately trying to keep it hidden. A small sound pulled Aaron from his thoughts. The child shifted uneasily in sleep, then whispered something broken beneath his breath. Don't lock me there. Aaron froze instantly. The boy trembled harder. No fire! Pain twisted across the child's sleeping face while tears slipped silently down his cheeks. Aaron stared at him in horror, because nightmares did not create fear this specific. These were memories. Real memories. And somewhere deep beneath the violence and terror lived a little boy still trapped inside the worst night of his life. A child everyone called feral, when in truth he might simply be terrified beyond repair. Winter settled deeper over the mountains, wrapping the Alpha territory beneath endless snow and silence. But inside the packhouse, silence no longer meant peace. It meant people were watching. Watching the air. Watching the Omega. Watching the impossible bond growing stronger with every passing day. Servants whispered behind closed doors. Guards exchanged uneasy glances whenever the child followed Aaron through the halls. Even members of the council began lingering longer inside the Alpha residence, pretending concern while carefully studying every interaction. Because the future, Alpha was changing, and change frightened powerful people more than violence ever could. The screaming fits became less frequent now. The biting stopped almost entirely around Aaron. Some nights the child even slept peacefully for hours without waking in terror. Nobody knew whether to celebrate or fear it, especially Alpha Kyle. The alpha spent most evenings standing silently outside rooms where Aaron and the boy sat together near the fire. He watched from a distance while the child slowly learned calmness again piece by piece. Sometimes Aaron folded linens while the boy rested nearby on the floor reading old books quietly. Other times they sat in complete silence doing nothing at all. Yet somehow those quiet moments carried more healing than years of healers and punishments ever had. Cale should have felt relieved. Instead, guilt hollowed him further every day. Because the more stable his son became, the clearer it became. That fear, not madness, had created the monster everyone blamed, and Cale had allowed it. One evening, snow battered the packhouse windows while Aaron repaired torn blankets near the servant quarters. Candlelight flickered softly across the room while the child sat nearby, unusually calm. For the first time since Aaron met him, the boy looked almost normal. Not frightening, not dangerous, just young. Tiny fingers clumsily traced patterns across the blanket wrapped around his shoulders while silver eyes followed the snowfall beyond the glass. Aaron glanced toward him quietly. "What are you thinking about?" The child remained silent a while. Then softly, "Snow hides tracks." Aaron blinked in surprise. The boy rarely spoke voluntarily. Even now, his words emerged carefully like someone afraid language itself might hurt him. "Who told you that?" The child's expression changed instantly. Fear flashed across his face. The calmness vanished. Aaron regretted asking immediately. But before panic fully consumed him, the child suddenly moved closer instead. Nearer to Aaron. Safer. It was always the same. Whenever memories surfaced, instinct drove the boy toward the only place he trusted. Toward him, Aaron's chest tightened painfully. He understood loneliness too well. But this child carried something far worse than loneliness. He carried terror. Nobody ever helped him survive. Outside the room, footsteps echoed down the corridor. The child stiffened immediately. Every muscle in his body tensed. Fear, Aaron noticed at once. Then Elder Merrick appeared outside the open doorway. The old council advisor smiled politely. But the moment the child saw him, everything changed. A vicious growl ripped from the boy's throat instantly. Aaron startled. The child shoved backward violently against the wall while panic flooded his face hard enough to make his hands shake. Merrick froze. Only for a second. Then his calm expression returned too quickly. "Still unstable, I see." The child lunged forward suddenly. Aaron barely caught him in time. The boy fought wildly trying to reach Merrick while pure terror twisted across his face. Not rage, not random violence. Fear. Aaron realized it with chilling certainty now. The child was terrified of this man. Merrick stepped backward immediately, masking unease beneath irritation. This is exactly why the council questions his future. Aaron tightened his hold carefully around the trembling child. "He's frightened." "Of what?" Merrick snapped coldly. The boy buried his face against Aaron instantly, hiding, like prey cornered before a predator. Silence filled the room. Then something strange happened. Merrick's gaze drifted toward Aaron slowly, carefully, and for one unsettling moment. The old advisor looked afraid too. The realization sent cold dread crawling through Aaron's stomach. Because guilty people feared recognition. And suddenly, Aaron wondered what exactly Merrick thought the child remembered. That night, Aaron returned to his room after helping in the kitchens. The moment he opened the door, he froze. Someone had been inside. Drawers hung open. Blankets lay overturned across the floor. The small wooden chest containing his few personal belongings had been forced open violently. The child sensed it instantly behind him. A low, dangerous growl vibrated through the room. Aaron's pulse quickened. Nothing valuable existed here. Nothing except His breath caught. The old fabric piece hidden beneath his mattress was gone. The blood-stained cloth wrapped around the silver crest belonging to the former Luna. Someone had taken it. Fear hit him hard, because almost nobody knew he found it, which meant one terrifying possibility existed now. Someone inside the packhouse had been watching him. The child suddenly grabbed Aaron's sleeve tightly, his silver eyes locked onto the overturned mattress. Then, toward the corridor outside, panic rose visibly across his expression. No. The word escaped, broken and frightened. Aaron knelt beside him carefully. What is it? The child shook harder, then whispered something barely audible. Bad room. A memory. Another memory. Aaron's stomach twisted violently. The boy remembered more than anyone realized, and if the wrong people discovered that, neither of them would be safe. Later that night, Aaron could not sleep. Snowstorms rattled the windows while the child rested fitfully beside the fire. Every few minutes, his breathing changed sharply, like nightmares stalked him even in rest. Aaron sat quietly near the candlelight, trying desperately to understand everything. The child reacted violently around specific council members. He feared certain hallways. Certain rooms, certain scents, not madness. Memory. Then suddenly something surfaced inside Aaron's own mind. A fragment, smoke, screaming. A child crying somewhere through darkness. Aaron frowned sharply. His head began aching. He pressed trembling fingers against his temple while old memories clawed upward from places long buried. Years ago, before becoming permanent servant staff, he had worked briefly inside the Alpha residence during winter shortages. The Luna had still been alive then. Beautiful. Kind. Unlike most nobles, she thanked servants personally. Aaron remembered that clearly. And one night, fire. The memory struck harder suddenly. Smoke flooding the hallways. Guards running. Someone shouting about traitors. Aaron staggered upright. The child startled awake instantly. Aaron barely noticed, because another memory crashed violently into him. A terrified little boy hiding beneath broken furniture, silver eyes filled with horror, tiny hands covered in ash. Aaron's breathing stopped. No, that couldn't. But deep down he already knew. He remembered carrying that child through smoke-filled corridors. Remembered shielding him while flames spread through the Alpha wing. Remembered guards taking the boy from his arms afterward during the chaos. The room spun around him. That was why the child trusted him. Not magic. Not instinct alone. Somewhere buried, beneath years of trauma. The heir remembered the Omega who carried him from the fire. The realization shattered something painfully inside Aaron, because this bond had begun years before either of them understood it, and someone inside the packhouse clearly feared that truth returning. The next morning, Aaron followed instinct instead of orders. While most servants prepared for the evening feast upstairs, he slipped quietly toward the abandoned wing again. The child followed immediately, always following. The farther they walked through forgotten corridors, the more tense the boy became. Dust covered old walls while broken chandeliers hung crooked from ceilings untouched for years. Nobody used this section anymore. Nobody even spoke about it. That alone made Aaron suspicious. The child suddenly stopped walking. Fear flooded his expression instantly. Aaron turned carefully. It's all right. The boy shook violently, then slowly pointed toward a distant doorway half hidden beneath shadows. The nursery. Cold dread crawled through Aaron's veins. Together they approached slowly. The wooden doors stood scarred deeply by claw marks old enough to fade with time. Tiny claw marks. The child whimpered softly beside him. Aaron pushed the doors open. Dust swirled through pale light, spilling across abandoned furniture and rotting toys left untouched for years. Silence wrapped around the room heavily. Then memories hit the child all at once. The boy stumbled backward, breathing hard while panic overtook his face. She cried. Aaron's chest tightened. The child clutched his head painfully. Bad men. Loud. Tears filled silver eyes, and suddenly he looked much younger than 6 years old. Small, terrified, broken. Aaron moved toward him slowly, but before he reached him, the child screamed. A horrifying sound ripped through the nursery, while memories finally shattered whatever walls protected his mind. Blood! The word echoed violently across the abandoned room. Aaron froze. The child collapsed, trembling against the floor while sobs tore from him uncontrollably. And then, footsteps thundered behind them. Aaron spun sharply. Alpha Kale stood frozen in the doorway. The Alpha's face had gone completely pale. Because he heard enough to understand the truth slowly surfacing beneath years of denial. His son remembered. Not madness, not curses. Trauma. Real trauma. Kyle stared at the claw marks across the nursery floor, then at his shaking child curled against Aaron desperately. And horror consumed him piece by piece, because suddenly the Alpha remembered things too. The night of the fire, the council insisting enemies attacked the Luna Merrick, controlling the investigation personally. The nursery doors locked from outside during the chaos. Kyle's breathing grew uneven. No. His gaze slowly lifted toward the child, and for the first time in years, the Alpha truly saw his son, not as a burden, not as a violent embarrassment, but as a terrified little boy abandoned inside the worst night of his life. The realization destroyed him silently. After that day, tension inside the packhouse became unbearable. The council noticed Kale changing immediately. The Alpha questioned old reports, reopened investigations, demanded records surrounding the Luna's death years earlier. Panic spread quietly among certain advisors, especially Merrick. Aaron noticed the old man watching him constantly now,